Hey guys, and welcome back to a new video. In this video I will show you a very cool plugin for Figma. Figma is a UI building tool, so usually you just build and create your mockups there, which you then afterwards implement in your app. So usually you have some kind of designer for that. The developer then gets the mockups and implements these in code. But now with this new plugin, which is called Relay, we can effectively create Figma UI components directly inside Figma and then have a Gradle plugin which converts these UI components from Figma to Jetpack Compose code. So what you see here, these two buttons that we will create, are just generated UI components in Jetpack Compose. So Figma generated these for us, and all we really needed to do is to add this here to our UI. So you will learn how you can create different variants of such UI components here, for example, a primary and a secondary button. You will learn how you can replace different parts of these to, for example, decide what kind of icon you will show here, also what kind of text that will show. You will be able to set an on-click list, and you can see a toast will appear if we click on that. So all that happens inside of the generated code, so we don't need to write a single line of code for that. It's still in a very early stage, that plugin, and there are quite a few limitations, but for these buttons I will show you how you can actually create that, and that will be a lot of fun. So the first thing we want to do is we want to jump into Figma, and I hope you have a Figma account. If not, then you can create that for free just on figma.com. And in here, where we have our designs, we want to create a new design file. And here in this design, we could give this a name of, let's say, action buttons or so, like this. And here we want to create our different buttons, now simply inside Figma. We can first of all create a little frame, this one here, so just a frame. And on the right side, we can then select a device we want to put our UI components into. I will choose Android large here, and then we will get a little Android device frame. So, and now we can actually create our two buttons here. That will not be something very special, just simple UI components in Figma. We can select this square tool here to create a rectangle, which we can then give rounded corners. So let's just drag that here, something like this. We can then center align that. And on the right hand, we can give this rounded corners. You can see we can simply drag here until we have a full round corner radius. We of course want to give this a background color, so we can go to fill, click on this color, and I will give this 00F15E, which is my typical green color. Feel free to choose anything else, of course. Then what else do we want to do? We want to give this a little bit of a shadow, so we can go to effects and add a drop shadow here. That's already looking quite fine. And what's important when we use this Relay plugin here for Figma, which generates this code, is that we give all of our UI components quite clear names, because these names that we give these components, like rectangle 1 here, for example, these will also be the names of the composables that Figma will generate for us. So here we rather want to choose something like button background or so. Then the next thing I want to do is we want, of course, add some text that we can then choose the button to have. So we click on this text tool here, click inside of our button, and we can add some kind of hello world text or so. This will be replaceable anyways, so we can just leave it like that. We can then set up the text here a little bit. We can choose a different font, which I will choose Source Code Pro, since we are developers. We want to give this text a little bit of a gray color, so I'll choose 16, 16, 16. Actually, you need to select this text like this. Now it has this dark gray color, and we want to, let's change it to, let's say, semi-bold, and just make it a bit larger. So we can center this here, hold down Alt, and drag this here to make it a bit bigger. Actually, you know what? Let's leave it like that, because we should do that here. This won't change the text size. Let's set it to 20. And then we also want to add our icon next to that. And since that icon will be replaceable, so we will be able to choose any type of composable for that, it doesn't really matter what kind of icon we choose here in Figma. So what I actually did is I went to plugins, so this Figma icon, plugins, and here I have this material symbols plugin. You can click find more plugins if you don't have that yet, and then search for material symbols. And with that, you simply get access to, just the material symbols from Google. As I said, it doesn't matter here. We can search for check, for example, pick this check icon, put it here inside of our button. And we also need to make sure that it is actually inside our frame. So we take this check and move it in here. And then we can align this somewhere next to our text. We can then select these and move them into the center of our button. Cool, so that is our very first button. If we take a look on the left side, one thing I want to change here is this this hello world name here, because we don't want the composable to be called hello world. Instead, we want this to just be called text or so. So we can rename this to text. And now what do we need to do to tell Figma, the Relay plugin, that this is now one UI component? Well, what we need to do is we need to select all these views, all these components, and then click on this little create component icon here. So if we do this, then you can see we have this little violet or purple component category, which we can now rename to action button. So this is how our final composable will be called. So if we were now to run this plugin, then it would simply create one UI component called action button for us, which combines these three UI components in form of composables. However, since we want to have two variants of our button, we also want to have a secondary call to action button, which is simply, which has a stroke, but not any fill and no shadow. We can select this button and actually click on add variant here. That way it will duplicate that, and you can see we have a default variant and a variant 2 now. We can rename these to, let's say, this one will be secondary, and this one will be primary. Oops, primary. And let's select the secondary one, and now we want to adjust that to actually fulfill our UI requirements for our secondary button. So we can double click on this background, because we want to get rid of this fill color. So we click on this little minus here to remove the color, and we want to add a stroke. So we click plus, let's make the stroke width set to 2, and we also give it the same type of green color we chose for our other button. We then go to effects and remove the drop shadow here. And we can then also color our icon and our text. For the icon, it doesn't really matter because we will replace this anyways. But for the text, it does matter. So we can double click on that, scroll down, and for the fill, we also choose our green color. Let's also color the icon. So we click on that and select the green color. And now we have our two UI components here in Figma. Actually it's just one UI component with different variants. And this will now generate one action button composable, which is our parent component here in Figma, but it will have these two variants. So there will be some kind of design parameter which Figma will generate for us. So we can choose, okay, we want the primary button or we want the secondary button. So that will be an enum class in the end. And that way we can very easily then later on choose which variant we actually want in our app. So now that we have our design, what is the next step to make Figma generate the code for us? The next step is that we need to add a Figma plugin, which again is called Relay. For that, you probably don't have that yet. You go to this Figma icon, go to plugins, and you can see I already have it, Relay for Figma. But if you don't have it, you can click on find more plugins and then simply search for Relay for Figma and save that here for your Figma setup. After that, you want to run this, and then this window will open up, and this plugin will basically now allow us to define, for example, properties that we want to have in our code. For example, that this text should be a variable, that we want to be able to change the text of the button, that we want this icon to be replaceable. So now you can see select a component on canvas and click on the button below to package it. So we can select our action button and then click create UI package. Let's do that. And now we get this window. And here we now need to set up these parameters. So the first thing I want to do is want to click on this plus icon. And we first of all need to select a component which we want to add a parameter to, for example, this text. And then we can set the text content of that as a variable. So we select text content. We give this a name, how it will be called as a parameter. I'll just choose text here. We can give this a description. I will leave that out here since it's quite obvious, like this. So we have that for the text already. And then we can click on the check mark and add children. So that is what we use if we want this check mark to be replaceable. So then we will just get a Lambda function in which we can put our very own composable instead of this icon. So we select that. And here we will just choose icon, like this. And this will, by the way, be automatically applied to the same component or the same UI component of all variants. So make sure to that these are actually called the same. So if you call this primary check and this secondary check, it won't work. It will only then add it to the variant you currently selected. But if these are called the same, then it will apply these to all. Cool. And if we then select our button, so our secondary button here, we also want to add a tab handler. So basically an on-click handler, which we can then call onClick. OnClick, like this. There we go. And now we have our button with all the parameters we want to be able to pass. OnClick listener, text, and an icon. And now we are actually ready to generate some code for this. So what is the step for that? We again want to go to this Figma icon. We want to go to File, and we want to save this to version history. So you can think of this similar as Git, just a version control system that you can save this current version of your UI design in Figma. You need to do that. So the plugin will actually then fetch your Figma account. So it will directly pull this design from your Figma account and then generate the composables based on that. So we can give it a title, added action buttons, for example. I won't add a description here, and we click save. There we go. And then we are now done for the Figma part. The next part would be that we jump into Android Studio and now need to set up Android Studio to support using this plugin. Here it's important right now when I'm creating the video that it only works with the stable versions of Android Studio. I'm not sure what is the minimum version it supports, but I'm using Dolphin here, and I also have the beta version of Electric Eel installed. And on Electric Eel, it does not appear in the plugins marketplace yet. So it seems like it will be there when it's stable, but yeah, just make sure that you use the latest stable version of Android Studio and then you'll be good. You open the preferences. If you don't find these, you can go to here, Android Studio, Preferences, and then we're going to go to Plugins, Marketplace, and here you want to search for Relay for Android Studio. I already have that installed. You simply click on install here, relaunch Android Studio, and then you will be good. Then the next thing we need to do is we need to kind of link our Figma account to this Android Studio plugin we just installed. And the way we do this is we go to Tools, and here we have this new icon, Relay Settings. We click on that, and here we need to enter our Figma access token. Where do we get this from? Well, we need to go to our Figma account. You actually need to go back, I think. Let's go back here, back to Files. Go to your icon in the top right, your user icon. Go to Settings, and then you scroll down to Personal Access Tokens. And here you can then add a token description, for example, relay plugin, then press enter and it will generate a token for you that you need to copy. You will only be able to see this once, and you then copy this token and put it in Android Studio. So after you copy this, you go to Android Studio and paste this here as Figma access token. Cool. So if you've done that, then you can click OK. Then go to your Gradle scripts, build.gradle app, and here you want to add this plugin, com.google.relay, and this version currently, maybe there is already a later version when you watch this, but you can then click synchronize now. And this Gradle plugin will then make sure that that will actually generate the Compose code for you after it fetched your designs. So now we want to go back to Chrome, to our Figma website, open our design again, our action buttons, and here we want to click on share. And then we want to click copy link. So we want to copy a link to this design, go back to Android Studio, go to File, New, and we want to click Import UI Packages. So that way we now import our UI package. So in this case, our action buttons. Click on that, And here we need to then add this link we just copied. We can also translate the Figma styles to Compose theme. Yeah, let's do that. Let's choose the material to design kit configuration and we'll click on next. Then it will fetch and download these UI packages. This does not generate the Compose code yet. It will just download these. You can see we have our 2 buttons here. We'll just download these in a way that the plugin understands, and the plugin will then convert these JSON files and what it all downloaded here to our composables finally. So we can click finish, and then you will notice that here is a new UI packages package in your apps directory. And these are all the files that it's downloaded from Figma. All we really need to do now is we need to rebuild our project. So let's actually first click clean. For me, it sometimes did not recognize that after rebuild. That's why better cleaned before. Then we click rebuild. And hopefully after that, we should be able to see our action button here in Jetpack Compose. So my rebuilding is finished. And if I take a look here, I don't get the action buttons yet. And that happened quite often to me. But if we go to our project view, take a look in our app directory, source main, there doesn't seem to be a build directory. Maybe we click build here, so make project. Maybe that will generate our files. I'm not sure why it did not generate these classes. Maybe we need to refresh here. So right click, reload from disk. Yeah, here's our build directory. In generated source, relay main, here we actually now have our action button UI component. So if we open that, this is now the generated code that the Figma plugin generated for us. It's of course hardly readable, but it does not need to be readable for us since it's just generated code. We don't intend to change this anyways. So we can close this and we can now use this here in our actual Compose design. So let's add a column, modifier, fill max size, well, let's say fill max width, and give this a bit of padding. Padding 16 dp, import dp. And now we can add our action button composables. You can see now it's recognized. The text for that will be, let's say, hello world. And then we have the option to pass a modifier, which we want to pass. So modifier fill max width. We want to be able to choose the design, as I said. So design is equal to design primary or secondary to just choose the variant of that button. Let's just make that one primary. And then we want to add an on-click listener. And here we can just show a toast or so. So hello world, toast.length long, and show, like this. And there is one parameter missing, which is of course the icon we want to pass. So icon is equal to icon. Here we can pass a composable, icons default, check for example, and let's not choose a content description, like this. And if we now copy this and also apply this for our secondary CTA, so let's have a bit of spacing, height 16 dp, and we paste this down below. Hello world again, or let's say secondary CTA. This time it's design secondary. And here we could choose something else like close, for example. Then if we launch this, let's see how that looks like. You can see that does not really look like we expect. So it has some similarities with our button, but we actually wanted to only fill the size of our green background. The shadow is way too large and the text sticks somewhere else. How can we fix that? We need to fix that in Figma. And that is also quite a good opportunity to show you how you can update your UI components, so in case you changed your Figma design. So let's go back to Chrome. And in here, if we double click on our button, then we get this auto layout section here. And we can use this to tell Figma how we want this our buttons to be laid out. So that's similar as in Android, you have match parent, wrap content, and all that stuff. So we can also define something like that in Figma. So if we click a plus here for auto layout, Then we can make sure it's centered. And we then also get these additional attributes where we can select horizontal resizing and vertical resizing. So here both are set to hug, which will kind of just try to shrink these down to as little space as possible. So in this case, it would just fill the space it needs, similar to wrap content. We also have fixed width. That is, yeah, I think that's pretty obvious that it's always a fixed size. And we also want to click on our text, because here we have we get fixed in horizontal and also fixed in vertical. But vertically, we want hug contents as well, so that it really only occupies the space that it needs, because otherwise the plugin for some reason just makes it fill the whole height, which it just did in our layout. We then also want to do this for our other button. So here for the secondary one, add auto layout, center the button, make sure both is set to hug, click the text, and yeah, that seems quite good. And I think here I did not choose hug in like horizontally. Let's say hug content as well. And I think this should be enough to fix the issue we had. So how do we now get these changes inside Android Studio? Well, we again go to Figma, File, and save this another time to our version history. So we say adjusted auto layout, for example, save this. Go to Android Studio, and here we now need to go to our UI packages, this package one here, right click and click update all UI packages in this module. And then it will simply fetch our designs from Figma again and update our UI packages. And after we then rebuild our project, let's go to build, clean project, rebuild project, we should be able to hopefully see some working UI components. So if we now launch this and hopefully don't get any errors, then take a look here in our app. It looks just as we want. Of course, our icon here is in the wrong color. As I said, since we dynamically set that content, we need to also add a tint to that icon. So we can say, actually not that one, the other one. Here we want to add tint, and here we just add the same color as we did in our Figma design, like this. If we then relaunch this, we should be getting two very nice buttons. And there we go. Yeah, that looks quite cool. If we click this button, we get our toast. If we click the other button, we also get a toast, and that works just fine. So that's quite cool how we can now create, how we can now generate UI code, Jetpack Compose code from Figma designs. What is now my view on this plugin? And should you use that for your production apps? Should you use that for all your Figma designs? What are the drawbacks? What are the limitations? So as for now, as I said, this is in a very early stage. I would not use it because it has really a lot of limitations. For example, you see that we don't really have this ripple effect when we click this button. So this this bubble that expands, and usually you want to have that for clickable elements. And the reason why that does not exist is if we take a look here in our action button and scroll down where that on click listener is assigned. Where is that? Not here, it's up here somewhere in this top level primary. If we take a look here, scroll down here, we make it tappable. It does not add an on-click listener, instead it makes it tappable. If we take a look here, then you can see it simply adds pointer input. So it sets an on-tap listener instead of an on-click listener. The on-click listener comes with that ripple effect, the on-tap listener does not. And I'm not sure why it uses on-tap listeners for single taps. I mean, for double taps and long presses, it's clear, because I think for that you need this gesture listener. But for single taps, it's really not necessary. So that's just one example. And of course, you can imagine that the more complex your layout gets, the more complex the behavior of a composable gets, the more, then it will just not be possible, at least at the moment, to do that with Figma. For example, at least as far as I know, if you want to make something like, for example, a password text field, where you can toggle the visibility of password and where you are able to enter some text, I don't think that's currently possible with that plugin, that it actually generates an actual text field with your design. And I can imagine there are a lot more use cases which you can't do with this plugin yet. That does not mean that I don't like this plugin. It's a really cool idea. It's right now what it does quite well. And I think if the Google team actually keeps on developing this and makes it more and more industry standard, this can at least save developers a lot of time. I don't think that we don't need UI developers anymore, because there will always be some kind of adjustments. But I think especially for very generic UI components like such a button or some image cards, for example, with some text and descriptions, that is something that you can very easily generate with this plugin. So it really depends on how this will go on in future and how this will, how the Google team keeps on developing this. But I think this can become quite promising in future. What do you actually think about that? Let me know that down below. Would be cool to have some kind of discussion here. And if you like this video, then you will definitely also like my more advanced courses in which I can go much more into detail than in my YouTube videos. You'll find them down below in the first link in this video's description. Apart from that, I wish you an excellent rest of your week. See you back in the next video. Bye bye.